At my sister's graduation, my parents disowned me, but it was what I uncovered that turned everything upside down. My name's Sen, and at my sister Callista's Harvard graduation, my parents decided to make an announcement that left everyone speechless. In front of everyone, they disowned me. No warning, no explanation. Just a warm smile for Callista and complete silence for me. My name was left off the invitations, the program, everything. But what they didn't know was that I already knew their secrets. I knew about the stolen inheritance, the forged signatures, and the house they sold without telling me. In the end, they weren't the ones who exposed the truth. I did. Before we get into this, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you? Drop a comment below because I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. I arrived early, not because I was excited, but because I wanted to see if they'd actually go through with it, if they had the audacity to make it official. The sun was beating down on Harvard Yard, shining so brightly, almost like it was congratulating everyone. Except me. Students were buzzing in and out of the gates, their caps and gowns catching the light. Parents proudly held roses and gift bags, their smiles wide and bright. And there I was, standing there with nothing in my hands, no flowers, no presents, just my breath. I spotted my parents near the reserved seating and took my time walking over. My mum, Astria, looked the part. She wore her pale blue suit and that same cold smile that never quite reached her eyes. My father, Everett, stood next to her, blazer draped over his arm, one hand glued to his phone, foot tapping impatiently on the grass. Callista stood between them, a bright glowing star in her Harvard robe, honor cords shimmering. The poster, Child for Success. They didn't notice me right away. When they did, my mum's eyes scanned me. But there was no recognition, just the hollow gaze of someone who barely remembers your name. "Oh, Sen," she said flatly. "You came." "I got the invitation," I replied, ignoring the sting in her tone. She chuckled dryly. "You must have seen a forwarded version," she said, dismissing me with a laugh. "I wasn't sure if the RSVP list even reached you." My father didn't say anything. He just checked his watch like it was the most important thing in the world. Callista, however, opened her arms for a hug, and I leaned in, out of habit more than anything. "You look amazing," I told her. "Thanks," she said, voice soft, almost apologetic. "I'm glad you're here." But her eyes flickered nervously, darting to our mum, as if she were calculating exactly how much warmth she was allowed to show me in that moment. I scanned the seating chart posted on the easel next to the entrance. "The Caldwell family," it said in bold print. Beneath it, Everett, Astria, Callista, and 2 guests. I looked for my name. It wasn't there. A woman handed me a badge, plain white with no family crest, no ribbon. Just the word guest in Times New Roman. I stared at it for a long time. I had helped my mother design the original family crest 20 years ago. I remembered spending hours on the typography, perfecting it. I should have left right then. That would have been the logical, self-respecting thing to do. But I didn't. I clipped the badge to my blazer and walked to the seating tent like a ghost, showing up at my own funeral. The ceremony started promptly at 11:03. A few professors and trustees took the stage to speak, their voices echoing across the yard. I sat alone in the far left section, next to an elderly man who was already asleep, and a toddler who seemed more interested in scribbling on her program than in what was happening. Then my father stood up. He stepped confidently to the microphone, adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. He smiled like a seasoned politician, the kind of smile that said he was about to give a speech that would make everyone in the room sit up and take notice. "Today," he began, "we celebrate the brilliance and dedication of our eldest daughter, Callista. Her journey has been nothing short of extraordinary." Polite applause followed, cameras clicking, capturing the moment. Callista looked down at her feet, modest as always. But then my father continued, "This day also marks a turning point for our family. a necessary shift in energy, values, and focus. My stomach dropped. We've made a difficult decision, he continued. From this day forward, we will no longer extend ourselves to those who do not align with the integrity and vision we hold. That includes our youngest daughter, Sen. Silence. No gasp, no protest. Just an uncomfortable stillness that seemed to spread through the crowd like a dark cloud. I didn't stand. I didn't cry. I sat there, hands clasped on my knees, suddenly acutely aware of every nerve in my body. My ears buzzed. My focus was entirely on the edge of the stage, trying not to let the tears well up. Callista didn't say a word. She didn't even look in my direction. Someone behind me whispered, "Did he just say that?" Another voice quickly followed, "Who does that at a graduation?" I swallowed hard, trying to force my jaw to stay still. I turned my face slightly away from the stage, as if doing so would make the moment feel less real. The speech went on. Something about investments, family roots, and weeding out negativity. But I couldn't focus anymore. Eventually, I stood up and walked out of the tent. Not rushed, not shaken, just calm, almost methodical, as if I had done this before. It wasn't the first time they tried to erase me from the picture. Later, at the reception, I tried to find my seat. There was a table labelled Caldwell and Guests. I walked up to it, scanning the name cards. Callista's name was there, as was Aunt Miriam's, even her college roommates. But mine? Nowhere to be found. A girl I hadn't seen in years, someone I used to know back in middle school, glanced up from the next table and blinked in surprise. "Oh, hey," she said, her voice awkward. "I thought you weren't coming. Your mom told everyone it was a closed family celebration. She said something about keeping the focus clear." She smiled, but it felt more like a half apology than an actual smile. On the table sat a folded ivory card. I opened it, expecting something from my parents. It read, "Congratulations to our only daughter, Callista. With all our love, Mum and Dad." That was the moment it hit me. Not in an emotional, dramatic way, but in a quiet, unsettling realization. A woman in a floral dress walked by, noticed me, and made an offhand comment. "You must be with the catering team," she said. "You're not wearing the family pin." I glanced at my badge. Guest. No name, no title, just a ghost badge. I smiled politely, said nothing, and grabbed a glass of Prosecco from a passing tray. I walked toward the back exit of the tent. No one stopped me. No one even noticed. I didn't go straight home after the reception. I walked through the city, past the bustling cafes and happy families, past the little girl holding a balloon that said, "Harvard Strong." It wasn't until the sun dipped behind the skyline that I finally made my way to the train and let the city carry me back to my small apartment in Somerville. I climbed the stairs slowly, the weight of the day pressing down on me. When I opened the door to my apartment, the silence greeted me like an old, familiar friend. It was the same silence that had always been there, but now it felt different. It felt colder, somehow. I kicked off my shoes by the door and stood still for a moment, letting the quiet fill me. I tossed the graduation program onto the kitchen counter, but it didn't land the way I expected. Its pages fluttered open, and my eyes landed on a photo from the ceremony. My parents, smiling proudly beside Callista. The caption read, "Proud moment for the Caldwell family." No mention of me. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on the living room rug. The old yearbook from Callista's high school graduation spread across my lap. My mother had told me not to bother showing up to that one either. "It's not your moment," she had said. I turned the pages, my fingers lightly grazing the edges. There it was. Our family tribute. The same custom ad that had appeared in the back of her yearbook, the one my parents bought to show off their perfect family. "To the daughter who never gave up. We are so proud of you, Callista." The photo that accompanied it was one I remembered clearly. my parents and Callista standing on the front porch of our house, arms around each other, beaming in the sunlight. I had been in that photo too. I had stood right next to Callista, wearing the dress my mum picked out for me. I remembered that day. I remembered how she yelled at me for getting a wrinkle across the waist of the dress. But in this version, I was gone, cropped out completely. I touched the edge of the page, staring at it until my vision blurred. It wasn't that they'd forgotten me. They had erased me. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the blinds and a stiff neck from sleeping on the floor, curled up with that yearbook. The old ghost of my past still clinging to me, even in my dreams. I got up and got ready for work, pretending like everything was fine. But in the back of my mind, it wasn't. At the non-profit where I worked, handling donor relations, no one mentioned what had happened. Of course they didn't. Why would they? The Caldwells were untouchable. They maintained their image so well, and I never talked about them. Never really let anyone see the mess behind the polished facade. Around 10, while I was pouring my second cup of coffee, one of the junior analysts, Rachel, wandered in and said casually, "Hey, I saw a few pics on social last night. Your sister's graduation looked amazing. That red dress she wore? Stunning." I turned, steadying my hand so I didn't spill the coffee. "She always looks the part," I replied, forcing a small smile. I was there, just in the shadows like always. Rachel laughed. "You're mysterious like that." "Mysterious?" I muttered under my breath. That was one word for it. I headed back to my desk, but there was no sense of relief. It wasn't just the awkwardness of the situation. It was something deeper. I glanced around the office at the faces of the people who used to be part of my life. The co-workers who ignored me, choosing not to see. The women who used to smile at me when I walked by, now avoiding eye contact as if I had somehow become invisible. And that's exactly what I was, invisible. I sat down, opened my inbox and stared at the screen, my reflection faintly hovering in the glass. What kind of family invites you to disown you in front of everyone, I asked myself. Worse, what kind of daughter still shows up, hoping it might be different? I hated how much I still hoped, how badly I clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, they'd realise what they'd done. Maybe they would apologise. But deep down, I knew I was kidding myself. I glanced over at the stack of papers in my drawer. Old birthday cards addressed to our daughters. Family newsletters where my name was squeezed into the corner like an afterthought. I remembered one holiday card they sent out to the donors one year, where only Callista's photo was featured. They called it a branding choice. It wasn't just one moment. It was thousands of little moments, thousands of cuts I had ignored, hoping it would get better. But last night, when I picked up my bag and walked out of the reception tent, I didn't leave empty-handed. I took the envelope, the ivory one with the gold foil lettering, the one addressed to our only daughter, Callista. I slipped it into my purse without a second thought, because ghosts don't knock things over. They just take what they're not supposed to. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I got quiet, and then I started digging. The rain began just after midnight, tapping softly against the kitchen window like someone who was too polite to knock. I sat there, wrapped in a blanket, my laptop glowing in front of me, casting a pale blue light across the room. I hadn't moved in hours. I had made a decision. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I clicked through old folders I hadn't opened in years, tax files, donation receipts, board meeting notes. Then, something caught my eye. A folder labelled Holdings Updated. Inside, there was a PDF file titled Transfer Authorization Seaside Property Final. I clicked it open. There it was, my full legal name, typed above a signature that almost looked like mine. Almost. The S was flatter, the loop on the L too wide. It wasn't my signature. It was a bad copy. And it had been notarized. I stared at the name of the notary in the margin. Savannah Caldwell, my cousin, of course. I grabbed a file from my drawer, a lease agreement with my real signature on it, and compared the two. No match. Not even close. I felt a wave of realization wash over me. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd committed a crime. They hadn't just erased me from the family. They had forged my signature to strip me of ownership on the only thing my dad ever gave me in his will. A stake in the beach house in Cape Elizabeth. The place I helped repaint during college. The place where I'd spent summers sanding the porch railing and grilling salmon with Dad. The place they'd let Callista turn into her birthday party venue, with 50 people showing up for a bonfire. Now, that beach house was funding Callista's boutique firm. The firm that branded itself with the slogan, legacy-minded investing inspired by family values. I closed my laptop slowly, as if sealing something I couldn't undo. I couldn't sleep after that. Around 3 a.m., I picked up the phone and called the only person in my family who ever treated me like I had a voice. Aunt Mavis. There was a pause on the other end, then her familiar rasp. "So, Len, honey, are you okay?" "Not really," I replied, my voice cracking. "I found a property transfer with my name on it, but it's not my signature." Another long silence. Then she whispered, "Oh, so Len, you saw it, didn't you?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I didn't know what to do," she confessed. "Your mama told me it was just paperwork. Said they were cleaning up the books for tax season." I leaned against the kitchen wall, sliding down to the floor. "You knew they were moving my name off the deed." "I thought it might have been a mistake. Or something they'd tell you about later," she said. "I'm sorry. I should have said something." Her voice trembled with guilt. "You know how your mother gets, and your father just follows." Her words hung in the air like smoke. I was tired of making excuses for them. "I know, baby," Aunt Mavis said. "I know." We sat in silence for a while, just breathing, listening to the rain outside. By dawn, my resolve had hardened. I brewed coffee and sat at my kitchen table with legal pads, highlighters, and the old laptop I hadn't touched in months. This wasn't just about a house. It wasn't just about being cropped out of a picture. It was the pattern. The way they always found a way to uninvite me. The way they erased me whenever something real mattered. But now, I was going to make sure they remembered exactly who I was. Not because I wanted a seat at their table again, but because I would be the one flipping the table over. By mid-morning, the clouds had started to thin, but the heaviness in my chest remained. I hadn't slept, but I worked through the night, cross-referencing documents, checking deed numbers, combing through local property registries like a woman possessed. A soft hum from my space heater filled the silence as I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold beside me. There it was, Bar Harbor, Maine. Parcel ID 007426. The family vacation house. The cedar-shingled one with the rocking chairs on the porch. The one my grandmother left to the Caldwell Family Trust. Status: sold. Buyer: Harlow Holdings, LLC. I clicked on the name. Harlow Holdings didn't even try to hide it. The registered agent was a business attorney in Boston, the same one Callista had posted about on LinkedIn 6 weeks ago. They hadn't transferred it. They sold it. Without telling me, without telling anyone. There was no press release, no family email, no dinner table talk, just a silent, surgical erasure of me from the family legacy. Like I wasn't even a beneficiary, like I never mattered. I closed the browser. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was violation. That was the word. This wasn't grief anymore. It was something sharper, colder. I needed air. I threw on my coat and walked to the bookstore 3 blocks away. Not to shop, but to think without staring at the screen. But fate had other plans. As I turned the corner by the self-help aisle, I heard her voice. Sen. It was Mrs. Henderson, an old family friend, holding a book titled Aging Gracefully Through Faith. She smiled, though the smile didn't reach her eyes. Darling, I heard Callista's doing so well. Your mother says she's expanding into luxury real estate. Isn't that just wonderful? I forced a polite smile. Yeah, funny. I thought that house was still ours. Her expression froze for a split second. Then she stammered, Oh, I don't know all the details. You know how parents always make moves without telling their kids? I didn't respond. I just left. When I returned home, my phone buzzed with a message from an old college roommate. Heard your folks sold the summer house? Callista's killing it. Jealous of her life right now. Jealous? That word hit me like vinegar. They envied her because they didn't know the cost of her shine, the people she had stepped over to get there. This wasn't just about business. It was abandonment dressed up in tailored suits. It was family photos where you've been cropped out, erased. It was a legacy with no trace of you. I did the only thing that made sense. I changed clothes, printed the deed documents, and packed my bag. Some answers aren't found online. Some are behind frosted office doors and receptionist smiles. I knew exactly where to start. I parked across the street from my mother's office, staring up at the tinted glass windows of the Caldwell Foundation. The last time I was here, I was 16, holding a printed version of my scholarship essay, trying to impress my mother, hoping they'd consider me for the summer program. They didn't. They picked Callista's friend instead. This time, I wasn't here to impress anyone. I walked in without calling. The front desk girl hesitated, then gave me a polite smile. Do you have an appointment? She asked. I didn't answer. I just walked down the hall, my heels clicking steadily on the floor. Astria Caldwell didn't flinch when I entered her office. She looked up from her screen as if expecting me. So, Len, she said smoothly, I'd like a few minutes. I stayed standing. Her office hadn't changed. The same white orchids, the same award plaques, the same framed headline. Mother, philanthropist, visionary. I half expected her to straighten the headline before we spoke. I regret that you felt hurt, she began, folding her hands. But we did what was best for the family's image. There it was, I said, my voice steady. The apology that wasn't.